Okay, well, I'm gonna get rolling now. We have a stacked agenda today. I appreciate you all being here with us for our fourth fifth TechX board meeting. Or sorry, fifth Travel Energy and Climate Collaborative Exchange meeting. And we'll have initially some welcome and the featured opportunities. We're going to give a brief overview of tribal energy resilience. And then we'll have presentations by Strategic Growth Council and California Energy Commission. And then we'll end with some peer sharing and discussion and then wrap up. So the purpose of today's topic is focused on tribal climate adaptation through infrastructure part 1 energy. So this is under the Tribal Climate Health Project and as also co-sponsored by the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative. And the purpose of these meetings are to learn, share, and discuss important climate energy related opportunities and issues affecting California tribes. I'm Josh Simmons, co-director of the Southern California Tribal Chairman's Association Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative, and also president and principal consultant with Prosper Sustainably. I'm joined by Angie Hacker and Shasta Gaughan, Shasta also being co-director of the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative and president of the executive board, and Angie working with Shasta and leading the Tribal Climate Health Project. The Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative has its 3 programs. It's capacity building and technical assistance, economic and workforce development, and policy and regulatory advocacy, primarily focused on identifying advancing climate, energy, and related economic and workforce development goals of the Southern California Tribal Chairman Association member tribes. But also we provide statewide programming and trainings like this, and also our California Public Utilities Advancing Tribes Interested CPC trainings. And then Angie, do you want to give a brief overview of Tribal Climate Health Project?
Oh, hi, everybody. You're going to hear from me in just a little bit, but the Tribal Climate Health Project is a program that's generally federally funded. We've been around for 9 years, and we have been serving tribes, helping them prepare for the health and other impacts of climate change with a lot of capacity building resources. And you'll hear more from me in a little bit as we have this particular conversation on how we can continue the work, our climate work through the lens of energy.
Great, thanks, Angie. And then I'll also encourage you all to also introduce yourselves in the chat, share your name and which tribe or organization you're with. That way we know who is here, and feel free to change your name on Zoom as well. So I'm going to go through some relevant opportunities right now, funding opportunities, other assistance opportunities, and I encourage you to add any other grants, incentives, events, or input opportunities or capacity building opportunities for tribes in the chat. So I think the SGIP residential equity solar plus storage program is kind of running out. I don't know if there's much money left available anywhere, but if you want to pursue the technical assistance funding under the Bureau of Reclamation, that is due today. CEC has its Advancing Grid Technology and Accelerating Projects. I believe Sierra is going to cover a bit more about this and likely the drives opportunity in her presentation later. The Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants and Sustainable Communities is due on November 21st. And then we have a series of block grants also available right now. In Southern California Edison Territory, the Microgrid Incentive Program is open until November 28th. And CEC has another opportunity focused on medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. Communities in Charge is available for multi-family housing projects only. Fast Charge California project funding, I think there's still about $27 million. And so if you have a DC fast charger, level 3 fast charger projects that are at near project readiness, this is a great opportunity to get that project substantially funded. So some pause funding, just, I'm not sure that Solar for All is really paused as so much as just gone. But hopefully we'll see the DOE's energy deployment grants resume. The Grid Deployment Office keeps indicating that they believe the 401(d) formula grants will come back, but we'll see. In terms of some featured events, I definitely would like to see, is registration still open for the Tribal Climate Health Project event, or is that closed now?
It is closed, but for those who are joining, just a reminder that that is coming up in a week.
Great, hopefully you'll be at Paula. And see, we'll share these slides afterwards. So there's green builds and ecological drought, the symposium on climate energy law. And the next TechX meeting is actually going to be in January. I think our plan right now is to skip the holiday months and actually then start these on a monthly basis. And some featured input opportunities. County of San Diego is looking for input on their emergency operations plan, and the governor's office is looking for input on their equity action plan. I think SGC is going to talk about some of their input opportunities. CPUC has its order instituting rulemaking for tribal policies of tribal OIR open right now with comments due on November 21st. Hopefully that's on your radar. Sierra will talk more about the tribal OIIP that CEC is running. And I will turn it over to Angie now to talk about energy resilience.
Hi, everybody. So Angie Hacker, also with Prosper Sustainably and lead consultant with the Tribal Climate Health Project. As I mentioned, coming to you from my car, but I'm pulled over, so don't worry. What we wanted to do with this featured discussion today for our TechX was to dive in on energy resilience. We're not breaking out like we normally do, where we usually have one conversation focused on funding and another conversation focused on a discussion about how we can continue our climate work through the lens of other adjacent fields, which basically looks like, how can I keep my climate work going and not necessarily have to call it climate? Because there's lots of ways to complete the work of climate adaptation, regardless of what you call it. So in this case, we wanted to focus on energy infrastructure as a way to continue to build resilience for tribes. And we're going to do sort of a combination, like a mashup. We're going to talk a little bit about how tribes are impacted when their energy infrastructure is affected by the exposures related to climate change, and then what you could potentially do about it with some examples from tribes and have a discussion, but also hear about specific funding sources available to help you make some progress towards those kinds of strategies. So my role here is really just to wet the whistle on getting you to start thinking about how tribal communities might be affected in many ways by climate change when climate change intersects with their energy systems. And so a few examples here, and you may find that it resonates with you, or you might find you have other types of exposures. So one would be, increased temperature. You might imagine as things heat up, the increased demand for air conditioning, also increases demand for energy, which places a strain on the grid. Rising sea level, flooding, wildfire, or ice is known to potentially either inundate or damage power plants, renewable energy systems, substations, lines, and other infrastructure. Drought limits water-intensive geothermal or geopower production. And then just generally higher than normal winds or other fire conducive conditions can help prompt a public safety power shutoff event, which we hear all the time at the Tribal Climate Health Project. Happens pretty often here in California to the communities that are a little bit more remote, and they're seeing that their power is being shut off more regularly. So all of this results in power outages and energy supply unreliability, and that creates a bunch of vulnerabilities that your community feels in a bunch of different ways by disrupting access to things that we all are relying on. So obviously, if you're just thinking about what happens when the power is either unstable or goes down, in those really hot days, suddenly there's a brownout, but then you have no access to air conditioning, and that's a big health concern, especially for the most vulnerable populations. Also for the most vulnerable populations with medical conditions, say like dialysis, for example, they don't have access to their electric dependent medical equipment. Refrigeration can be an issue. And then in terms of, extreme disaster scenarios, so say there's a wildfire or flood, communications and emergency information systems maybe you can't access them if the power is down. And then just general getting around and getting supplies and getting in and out of tribal lands. We see, access to ports and railways and safely lit streets, tunnels and bridges. All of that struggles when the power goes down, which can affect things like your access to health and emergency services and generally supplies, even if it's a long-term thing, food. And so our water systems can also be affected because a lot of the water systems are power dependent. So things like distribution and treatment. If you have those yourselves, you might be thinking about power backup systems for those. And then folks getting just to school or work is an issue when the power is out. Maybe the facilities have closed. And that becomes a real issue we hear with tribes when they have key economic facilities that are closed for any significant period of time, for example, like hospitality. And beyond that, we know that there is also just the issue of some tribes not having access to gas and electricity services at all. And some of the exposures of climate change just exacerbate the dangers associated with that, meaning, as things get hotter and hotter, not having electricity becomes a bigger and bigger problem. Okay, so that's just a general overview of how we have sort of heard from tribal communities how they might be affected. So just wetting your whistle about the importance of energy infrastructure and how it intersects with climate change. I'm going to hand it back off to Josh to tell you a little bit more about the kinds of things that tribes generally can do about it to protect themselves and their community.
Thanks, Angie. So yeah, will be a very high-level primer on this, and I can go into depth in many of these topics and other forums. But renewable energy resources, solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, things that are not necessarily going to be impacted by the centralized grid are going to increase energy resiliency, although they have their own vulnerabilities as well. Energy storage in many forms. I think we think of lithium-ion batteries. There's non-lithium batteries. There's a push toward long-duration energy storage, but there could be pumped hydro sitting in a fuel tank running a turbine that is generating energy, but also thinking in terms of fuel storage. So that might be larger propane or diesel tanks for a generator. It also could be having access to fuel at a fueling station within the community. Microgrids include a lot of these things. They include backup generators as well. Your community may want to have a resilience center that has a place where people can plug in, that they can shelter. That can be a cooling center, provide essential services, supply food to the community. Energy efficiency itself is worth looking into, because if you reduce the energy load and burden on the grid and on the resources that you have, if you have local resources, distributed energy resources, then you want to use as little power as possible. Energy resiliency can go hand in hand with energy sovereignty, although full energy sovereignty without access to the grid means that that potentially increased vulnerabilities as a result of being reliant upon just the local resources. And to consider redundancy too. So I work on a lot of clean energy microgrids, and often they also have backup diesel or propane generators as well if the solar and storage other resources go down. And then we need to think about just some communities and some homes don't have energy access at all, and they're that much more vulnerable to extreme events, extreme weather. Building decarbonization or electrification of appliances and other things in a home or building, that could increase energy resiliency. It also can create a vulnerability if you're currently relying upon gas, propane powered systems for heating and cooling. Well, if you lose the power, you electrify, and those are now supplied by electricity, then that could be more vulnerable. At the same time, there can be disruptions, and for extended outages, you could run out of fuel. And if you have a renewable energy source on site, then the vehicles and appliances remain online. So since we want to make sure we have enough time for other speakers, I won't go into it. But I think, well, I'll share one last thing. So I've been working with the Weapai Band of Kumeyaay Indians on their off-grid solar plus storage microgrids, and this is an instance where, just having energy access is addressing a critical vulnerability within the community itself. We've been initially looked at it from the standpoint of a more centralized microgrid system. The project we're proceeding with is more distributed, and there's, you know, kind of pluses and minuses. There tends to be a lot of infrastructure costs associated with running, you know, this amount of distribution among a small home, you know, homes and other facilities that aren't really concentrated, and those costs can become excessive. It's nice to have a one centralized system to work on. You know, that can simplify things. It also creates a vulnerability. If the microgrid goes down for the community, it goes down for all the facilities. So we, you know, with the case of WePipe chose to distribute the systems throughout and not have them interconnected. So if one goes down, it doesn't affect the others. And each does have redundancy. So there's solar plus storage plus a backup propane generator. And then the cost is that much lower because they're not running conduit and lines between all the facilities to a centralized system. So today with us, we have two speakers from the Strategic Growth Council, and I know Sierra's here from the California Energy Commission. Strategic Growth Council is going to focus on their Transformative Climate Communities grant and their round 6 draft guidelines they're seeking feedback on, as well as their Community Resilience Center round 2 draft guidelines for that grant. And then Sierra is going to discuss the different programs and funding that are available to tribes through the Energy Commission to address energy resiliency. So I will turn it over to Strategic Growth Council.
Thanks so much, Josh. Can y'all hear me okay? Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us in this space. My name is Anna Jane Jones, she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager for the Community Resilience Centers program. As Josh mentioned, I'm joined by Nicole Cartwright, who will be presenting in just a moment. She is the Transformative Climate Communities program manager. Next slide, please. So we'll start with an overview of SGC, who we are, and what the CRC and TCC programs are specifically, and then we'll move into some information about our next rounds of funding, which are both funded by Prop 4 or the Climate Bond. So just to give you a brief intro to the Strategic Growth Council, or SGC for folks that are not familiar with us, we are comprised of a 10-member council. That 10-member council has cabinet members from 7 state agencies, as well as 3 public at-large members. And SGC coordinates and works collaboratively across state government and with public agencies, communities, interested parties to achieve sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. Due to SGC's position within the governor's office and our council, we're able to serve as a sort of state incubator. So we trial, we own solutions for local communities, and we scale them throughout California. Next slide. So I'll talk briefly about the CRC program first. So the CRC program is one model, one option for funding resilience hubs. For those of you who are not as familiar with resilience hubs, we call them community resilience centers within our program, but these are really trusted, locally managed neighborhood centers that serve communities both during emergencies and year-round. So the CRC program itself was established by SB 155 in 2021 to fund the creation of resilience centers to provide shelter and resources during climate and other emergencies. I'm not going to dive into the nuances of the program today, but I'm happy to answer additional questions about our first round of funding and our upcoming second round, or any sort of program specifics you want to get into. Next slide. So the Community Resilience Centers program, or CRC program, is one example amid a larger landscape that includes TCC of programs that fund community-led resilience initiatives. These programs all require collaborative governance, they require robust community engagement, and they typically fund a range of planning, project development, and implementation activities. Next slide. So the CRC program specifically is flexible to account for the vast spectrum of communities that we have across California. We know resilience is more than just the built environment, which is why it's important that our program fund both capital projects as well as services and programs. So on the capital project side, that really refers to the actual resilience center building itself, as well as campus amenities. And those campus amenities could be anything from bus stops to community gardens, EV charging stations, battery storage, and more. We also fund resilience services and programs, as I mentioned. These programming and activities strengthen the social infrastructure of communities, and they're meant to target education, workforce development, public health, and more. So I'm going to just pause there and pass over to Nicole to share a bit about the TCC program.
Thank you, Anna Jane, and yeah, thank you all for inviting us to be here today. And just know that we're giving a very brief overview of all of this, and we'll provide some additional resources at the end for you to be able to continue to connect and stay engaged in our work and our available fundings. So the TCC program has a lot of similarities to CRC. We fund neighborhood level community-driven climate resilience projects. Multiple projects that are coordinated. They all need to be reducing greenhouse gases and or provide economic and health benefits to our state's most disadvantaged communities. Our next slide, please. Our program funds 3 different grant types. We have planning, project development, and implementation. Our planning grants are typically around $300,000 for various capacity building activities, community engagement, and planning. Our project development grants are usually up to about $5 million. They include everything from planning grants plus basic environmental infrastructure, permitting, and final design work. And then our implementation grants have varied over the years from about 10 million to 66 million. And they fund various activities, all that we just mentioned as far as community engagement and planning and design, plus the implementation of 3 different project strategies that are eligible activities within our guidelines. And this includes housing, active transportation, mobility, energy efficiency, water efficiency, and much, much more. Solar, some things that you've already talked about here today. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. That's perfect. Great timing. So some things that make TCC a little bit unique are that, we are really driven in the fact that we want the projects to be developed locally, designed by the community, at the neighborhood level, whatever the needs are for that particular community. We really want them to also be integrated. So there's, a project size area limitation, and we want the design of our what we call transformative elements to be integrated with the actual projects themselves. And so our transformative elements are community engagement, workforce development, displacement avoidance, and those need to be integrated throughout the project to have that really catalytic adventure. Next slide, please. So both TCC and CRC have funding that is included in Proposition 4 or the Climate Bond. With the recent passing, that authorized $10 billion in general obligation bonds for safe drinking water, wildfire prevention, and protecting communities and natural lands from climate risks. So this allows, we have multiple programs at SGC. So it's the CRC program, TCC program, Land Equity Task Force, and our sister agency, the Land Use and Climate Innovation, has funds under their Extreme Heat and Community Resilience program. CRC is slated to receive about 60 million, with approximately 55 million of that being anticipated for grant funds, and TCC is slated to receive 150 million, with approximately 125 of that to be available for grants. Next slide, please. So our timeline, we are actually right in the middle of our public comment period. We released draft guidelines for both CRC and TCC at the end of September, and that comment period will be open and available until January 2nd. We hope to release final guidelines in spring or summer of 2026, and that's when applications will open and a NOFA will go out, a Notice of Available Funding. and with anticipating awards going out in early 2027. Next slide, please. So during this public engagement period, we have done some pre-draft guidelines engagement. We are flipping our application process a little bit on its head. We're trying to allow for more of the project development and creating detailed work plans and budgets and really getting to final implementation as a funded aspect of our program instead of all that time and effort going into unfunded time going into an application, not knowing if you're going to get funded. So we're hoping that this really helps reduce barriers and creates better access for all of our communities across California, but especially our tribal communities. So our draft guidelines are open for 90 days, closing on January 2nd. And I will plop into the chat a bunch of links, but we do have some upcoming input sessions. There's an input session that will be strictly, or not strictly, but primarily focused on rural communities in California. And then there will also be one that's a general statewide, all communities, and it will cover the application process and what we've changed, key points to be aware of. We just held our tribal focus one, and so hopefully some of you saw that, and if not, it is recorded and posted on our website, which I'll share links to that here in just a second. Okay, I will go ahead, and I think next slide is our last slide, and I'm not sure, Josh, if you want to open for questions now or wait until after the next presentation.
Well, we have 2 or 3 minutes if somebody has one burning question that they want to ask. Otherwise, you can throw questions in the chat and we can have that be part of the discussion at the end.
There is a question in the chat, but I see that Emily has her hand up. Emily, go ahead.
Oh, good. Thanks, Shasta. I have a question. For the TCCs, do they have to be located on the reservations? Because as some of you may know, that most of us, if not all of us, are displaced. The reservations, were a structured area where we were placed and enforced to be placed. So, yeah, we have specifically Kumeyaay have homelands along the coast, which, we have no reservation. None of the tribal nations in Southern California have reservations along the coast. So, yeah, that was just my question, if that has to be on the res.
It does not. So if it is on non-tribally led lands, we would just need to, within the application process and within the partnership, make sure that we have, the county or whoever, the city, whoever's land that is, be a participant in the partnership, so that we know that there's, communication and agreements going across both parties.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, good question.
You're muted, Josh.
One last question before we turn it over to CEC is in the chat. A great deal of greenhouse gases result from diet, agricultural practices, and food waste. Are there any programs working on these areas? The Prop 4 slide suggests there are.
I am not seeing that.
It's from Ken at 10:25 a.m.
Oh, here we go.
I can step in to just suggest one thing we can do. I have received access to a spreadsheet, which is a really nice summary of all the pathways of funding through Prop 4, which we can distribute to this group.
Yeah, and that's great. We TCC doesn't specifically focus on agricultural practices, but we do have TCC. One of the project strategies is related to recycling, composting, food waste, and has lots of different eligible activities within that strategy. So while we're not directly tied to agricultural, there is a lot of crossover, and I think that's also an opportunity for any public comment related to that project strategy. As we have focused so many of our funds previously in urban areas, And now we're trying to, grow our breadth of where we're funding and moving further into rural areas and into tribal communities. So that would be a great comment to provide if we're not actually touching the needs that are needed.
And I'll just add that our friend and colleague Kendra is from the Chickaloon Native Village of Alaska. So Kendra, if you have comments that you would like to submit, reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to throw those into to the comments that will be coming from Paula. By the way, I was late, so hi everybody. I'm Shasta. I help with this stuff.
Hey,
That's why I'm just butting in here.
We'll turn over to CC so Sierra has enough time for her presentation, and we'll circle back to additional questions. I see Emily yours, and then we'll circle back after the CC presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Sierra.
All right, thanks, Josh. And thanks everyone for inviting the Energy Commission here today. My name is Sierra Graves, and I serve as the Director of Tribal Affairs and Tribal Liaison for the Energy Commission. This year, Energy Commission celebrating 50 years of energy excellence, and so we're really trying to do better in resilience and tribal energy sovereignty, and so we appreciate having this conversation today. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about funding broadly, then discuss some past examples of things CEC has funded, and then discuss current and future funding opportunity, and close with some related policy. So one of the big areas that CEC is working to support tribally led energy sovereignty is in relation to funding. The CEC funds a variety of areas. You can see kind of 5 big buckets on the screen. We fund clean transportation, everything to energy innovation and microgrids. And so we've worked to stand up programs in a variety of these areas. Next slide, please. The CEC partners with California Native American tribes so far in excess of $130 million of CEC funding, with a bulk of that funding going to support tribal microgrids. And so pictured here, we have our first tribal microgrid partnership with Blue Lake Rancheria, who, as pictured in 2022 following a 6.4 magnitude earthquake, supported thousands in the surrounding community, as they were the only one with power necessary to support critical community needs, such as providing ice for food storage and supporting medical equipment. Next slide, please. We know from partnering with tribes on these projects that some of the projects can grow. And this is seeding the future energy sovereignty projects. So we saw this most notably with Blue Lake Rancheria's tribal microgrid, which catalyzed an intertribal energy project known as Terrace. And while Terrace is a tribally led project, the state's honored to support this project through EPIC and LDES funding, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, at the CEC and MIP awards from the CPUC. This project specifically will support one of the worst circuits in the state, the HOOPA 1101 circuit. Next slide, please. As the state exponentially increases battery storage capacity, as shown below, battery innovation funding can be leveraged for deployments as demonstration projects. We've seen this most notably through 2 programs, the Long Duration Energy Storage Program and the Electric Program Investment Charge funding. LDES or Long Duration Energy Storage, has supported 2 of the largest energy grants for utility scale microgrids with Viejas and Pesquenta. And EPIC has supported microgrids such as Saboba's that backed up the Emergency Operations Center and Fire Station. Next slide, please. As the state also advances goals to rapidly deploy EV charging infrastructure, we know that there's a critical need for reliability and resilience for EV charging. In our recent tribal-specific clean transportation program solicitation, the solicitation allowed for EVs to be EV charging infrastructure to be backed up by any combo of solar and storage that was sized to support the EV charging infrastructure. Along this line, the CEC has a current open solicitation distributed resources for innovative vehicle energization strategies, also known as drives. While I'm limited in what I can say because this is an open solicitation. As noted publicly, the solicitation aims to expedite energization timelines, reduce ratepayer costs, and target other technical, regulatory, and operational barriers associated with commercial EV charging infrastructure paired with behind-the-meter microgrids by incorporating advanced power control and energy management systems and energizing through IOU flexible service agreements. Next slide, please. And so I've talked a little bit about what we've done historically and where to kind of watch for forthcoming funding, but I want to talk about a solicitation that's open now and due November 14th. Again, I have to limit a little bit of what I say because it is an active solicitation, but the Advanced Grid Technology Acceleration Projects grant funding opportunity is open now. And as shown in the publicly available slide, which I've screen grabbed and put on this slide on the screen in front of you, front of the meter microgrids are eligible submissions to the solicitation. And a key thing for any microgrid application is to discuss how it will integrate with utility planning and operations. This award will be between $4 million and $12 million, and there's a total available funding of $24 million for this program. Next slide, please. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the $30 million tribal direct install program through the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. We're really excited about this program. The guidelines are posted, and while the official comment period for this has closed, the dockets are always open and CEC will always accept comments. As the guidelines are currently drafted to reflect the feedback we heard, every California Native American tribe will receive a base allocation to decarb about three to five homes and can then choose to uptake more funding until that $30 million is exhausted. While we're limited by legislative directives and on what we can fund, there's a couple things that we've been able to do to be responsive to what we've heard from tribes on this program. And so I want to call attention to two footnotes that are sometimes overlooked in the draft guidelines. So one of the footnotes I want to call out is footnote 15, where the CEC notes that homes do not need to remove a wood burning heat source to be able to spend funding on a heat pump. And I also want to call out footnote 17, where the CE says, in addition to eligible measures listed in the statewide direct install program guidelines, wiring to make the building solar ready is an eligible measure for the tribal direct install program. Because while we can't fund solar, we know that resilience and reliability are important when decarbonizing. And so we want to use the funding where we can to help get the homes solar ready. Next slide, please. Going to switch gears a little bit into policy and touch base on a couple of policy areas. So the CEC and the state as a whole are working to decarbonize the electricity supply per Senate Bill 100. And while we do this, minds much smarter than me are modeling different ways to decarbonize the grid. And a lot of this work is looking at a resource mix. And so I just want to flag that all of this work needs to be rooted in partnerships with California Native American tribes. And we want to invite tribes to weigh in on this space as we're looking to have the first tribal chapter ever in the SB 100 report this time. Just a quick bump for those that get all of our emails that we do have an SB 100 tribal working group that's meeting later this afternoon. Next slide, please. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the informational proceeding on tribal affairs and tribal energy sovereignty. To further understand how we can better support tribes, the CEC opened an informational proceeding on tribal affairs and tribal energy sovereignty. And this proceeding covers lots of things in the scope, as you can see by the 5 dot points listed there. But what's really important is we want to be in listening mode. We want to hear things like resilience concerns and how the CEC can better do better in that space and better incorporate resilience considerations into our funding opportunities. So we're in the first round of 11 tribal regional roundtables throughout the state. And our third roundtable is happening later this week in partnership with Middletown Rancheria. So next slide, please. With that, I just want to thank everyone for your time, and please feel free to reach out if CEC can be of assistance. My email's on the slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So we'll kind of go into a general discussion, but any like questions for Sierra, one or two, before we kind of open it up to cover any of the topics we've discussed today?
I would recommend have your meetings hybrid. I noticed that the meeting in Middleton is in person, right? Not all tribes can take time off to leave their communities, fund a trip to get there. So just keep that in consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback, Emily. I will say all of our SB 100 meetings are virtual only. Totally hearing you on the regional roundtables on tribal affairs and tribal energy sovereignty. We're trying to get as close as we can to everyone with the 11, but totally hearing you that hybrid just gives way more options and eliminates the capacity barriers. So thank you for that, Emily.
Jeff asks, are there meetings of the CEC group planned for the San Diego County area?
Was that San Diego County, you said?
Yeah.
So we did have one. I realize this is technically Riverside County. We did have one in partnership with Pechanga. That was our second regional. We are considering having an additional San Diego one, but that hasn't been determined yet. It's kind of budget pending right now. So more to come, Jeff, and we'll be sure to send that out as soon as we know. And yep, totally acknowledge, Emily, Pechanga is not San Diego, it's Riverside.
Are there any future virtual meetings, statewide virtual meetings on the tribal IIP?
Yes, there is going to be another statewide one, but we don't have a date yet. So we had to do some pivoting and some rescheduling because we were conflicting with a couple things, but there will be another statewide one virtual for sure. We're also happy to meet one-on-one. We can set up virtual meetings. I know a couple tribes have requested doing one-on-ones in this space. And then we've, of course, opened formal government-to-government consultation as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sierra. So I want to open this up, full discussion now on the programs that Energy Commission has discussed today, as well as Strategic Growth Council, and then generally just to open it up to anything the tribes want to discuss with respect to energy resilience, with respect to the impacts of climate change and needs and opportunities you all would like to see. So feel free to add more in the chat or raise your hands. Sierra, I have a question on the equitable building decarbonization. We've had some discussions about this and some of the electrification efforts and how to a degree they kind of can increase some vulnerability and resilience risks. But I know you mentioned the measures that could increase resiliency through equitable building decarb program. There also is a statement in there about that energy storage specifically associated with like the measure installed that's limited to that measure is eligible. Can you elaborate on that or provide an example? Is that like a UPS for, would that be like a UPS specifically for one of the a heat pump or something?
Yeah, I'll have to circle back with this group, Josh, because I saw that language as well, and I don't think I got a clear answer. So it seems like it was a little bit conflicting. So I think it might be something that's worthwhile to maybe weigh in on, since it's in the guidelines and it's not a solicitation yet, as to what that would look like in a successful program. But I'll follow up with how the team is currently envisioning it in an email, and then you can share it with this group.
Okay, great, thank you. Emily, you had a question in there about the Prop 4 list of funding where it's being distributed alongside funding opportunities. So there was a few answers in the chat. Do you feel like that question's been answered for you?
Yeah, if you looking at where I commented the replies, Nicole, she provided a link to, it looks like a list. So I would recommend folks to check that out.
Okay, great. Thanks,
Yeah,
Bridget.
I'll add to that, Emily. I think it's a great question, and CNRA has promised that they are going to create a better resource that's like searchable and hopefully not just a PDF of a whole bunch of programs, and so hopefully it'll be more user friendly, but TBD on that final outcome.
And then, Bridget, you had asked about the TCC and CRC funding for the pre-development activities and going after both for the same. I think sounds like your question was answered, but can you confirm? Do you need any further clarification?
I do not need further clarification. I got my answer and I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Great. Well, is there any feedback that, anybody wants to provide? So I think, CEC is looking for feedback on EBD, on the tribal IIP, the energy sovereignty proceeding, and, the Strategic Growth Council is looking for feedback on their guidelines or just generally on both Transformative Climate Communities and Community Resilience Center. So any feedback or input you want to provide or questions you want to ask, Emily?
Just kind of an overall statement for both funding opportunities or programs. They should always, especially when it comes from the state or even the federal level, we're working on the local level. But when it comes to the agency fundings, it should, promote, uplift tribal sovereignty. So when the limited waiver of tribal sovereign immunity is, a condition, that's not necessarily uplifting and centering tribal sovereignty. That's actually impeding on our sovereignty when you ask us to limit it, to provide that limited waiver. I just wanted to mention that now. I know it's come up for my tribe and some other tribes for funding and not just funding, but other resources as well. I know some funding also requires that by law, but just thinking, trying to get outside of that colonial mindset of this is what's in place, so this is how it has to be. Just kind of putting it in the air. I know it only gets as far as it's heard.
I appreciate that, Emily, and I'll just respond and speak on behalf of SGC. We do not require it for currently. We do not require it for any reimbursement-based agreements, which has been great, and I think the tribes have been we've been working well with them, but we currently do require it for any advance pay. I will tell you though that your voices are being heard and the conversation is actually very active right now with our leadership, our executive director, our council, and our legal on how we can remove it, reduce it, change that requirement. So keep those voices strong because they are listening.
Yeah, and even reimbursements grants is putting that burden on the tribe, putting the cost on the tribe, which, like you said, some tribes can do that, but a lot of the tribes that I work with cannot. Unfortunately, they have to juggle funds, capacity just to get that, funding from the state or from the federal government.
Appreciate that.
And if I can just speak for CEC, Emily, appreciate that. Our leadership is hearing that. We're hearing that. I would say that's one of the most consistent things at every one of our informational proceedings is removing the limited waivers. And so right now our leadership, while we're still working at, a system or something that can go broader for CEC, our leadership has been reviewing solicitations on a case-by-case basis and trying to remove the limited waivers while working with legal. The largest one that infrastructure solicitation we've been able to remove it on so far is the solicitation we had out of the Clean Transportation Program, and that was $15 million. But always looking to grow in this space, and totally hear you and agree with you, Emily. And I think continuing to raise it is definitely doing something, and we're already seeing some movement.
I have a question more for the group now, not necessarily for the state. I mean, you guys are welcome. I recently seen some communication online that said that NCAI is promoting AI, artificial intelligence. So I was just curious if anyone is doing or tracking like the implications, or what the conflicts of AI, right? The communities that it disturbs, the watersheds that it disturbs, the environment, the habitats, the cultural heritage that it disturbs. I know Indigenous Environmental Network plans on presenting to NCAI about these matters because they want to support our tribal leaders in understanding all this full circle, right? AI isn't just what's in front of us, but what communities it actually impacts. So wanted to bring that up to this group.
You know what, Emily, I'm going to jump in on this one, and don't panic, Josh. I won't be as graphic as I was about it yesterday. I am not a fan of AI. I think it's the devil. But from a climate standpoint, we understand that the data centers that are being developed to support the servers that are needed to power AI and other computer-based tools are a problem. They're an environmental hazard. I'll just say they have a massive impact in terms of the amount of energy they require, the water they need for cooling, and things like that. So I do think it's a vulnerability that we need to be addressing and thinking about, even when it comes to our climate change preparedness. If you're in a place like Southern California or in Arizona, where there is a lot of AI data centers, or just data centers in general, being built in places that really aren't environmentally suitable for the kinds of resources that they use, then that's going to have an impact on all those tribes throughout the Southwest. The Pueblos in New Mexico, the Diné Nation in Arizona. Oh, and by the way, for those who aren't really in the tribal area that much, NCAI is the National Congress for the American Indian, or of the American Indian. And so, Emily, it's an amazingly important question. And I'm really glad that you.
I mean, from an energy resilience standpoint, though, I mean, the strain on the grid, that's, we're having to deploy more energy resources to support data centers, and to the extent that also our communities are relying upon AI to perform certain functions, like if those so they're taking away energy resources that are straining the grid, but then if the data centers supporting the AI go down, then there may be services that are going down that are needed for communities. So it's something that really needs to be accounted for within our for tribes and for statewide planning on the resources that are being dedicated towards
Right.
and how that's being balanced with local communities that are still at the end of lines and are being subject to public safety power shutoff events, or just don't have grid capacity to add more homes or add EV charging infrastructure.
Yeah, I raised the question in a way that's more directed towards energy with you all and, the environment. But there's also the other flip of the coin of tribal data and knowledge sovereignty, which is, not safe with AI at all. And we've already seen that with the publication of language books, not from tribal members, but based off of the information. So I just wanted to pin that too, because that is a major factor too, is the not just the data, because the data is what is right, the facts. And then there's the knowledge, the traditional understanding and culture.
Great, thank you, Emily. We have a few more minutes for another question or two. Or just thought, I think it's, what I'd like to hear is like, what is preventing your tribe from taking the next step with deploying some energy resilience measure or service for your community, what's that barrier? That we want to better understand it in our, our state and other partners, so they can help address that.
And feel free to put your answer in the chat if you don't want to hold forth or.
Well, we, really appreciate everybody being here today and, continuing to participate in these. I said, we hope to, we're going to we'll do a little pause over the holidays and resume in January, and then likely be doing them monthly or so. And, if you have topics you want to be covered during these TechX meetings, we're not always going to merge them and have, we'll do breakouts for energy separate from other climate related matters. So feel free to email them to us at any point. And, if there are certain agencies or other organizations you want to hear from as well, I'd love to invite them and to just have, a more in-depth discussion with them on what we want to hear about.
Thank you, everybody. We always appreciate seeing you here. It's great to see, what did we have? We had at one point like 72 folks. So thank you for taking time out of your day for us. And we will see you here again, I guess, in January.